Welcome to the Man Rules Podcast. If you're looking to live with more intention, build connection, and live a more authentic, meaningful life, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dan Griffin. I don't know about you, but it seems to me that they keep changing the rules for us men without telling us. So each week, I just throw out the rule book and cover the tough topics about the real issues that men face. At the end of the day, I'm not here to tell you what kind of man you're supposed to be. I'm here to help you make your own rules and become the kind of man you want to be. So let's jump in. All right. Well, welcome to another episode. I am here with my good friends Michael Dinneen and Tim Walsh, and we are going to be having what we call a deep dive conversation, and this is something that we're hoping to do on a regular basis. And really what it is an opportunity for us three men to model perhaps a different way for men to communicate, to develop and demonstrate intimacy, and also to have fun, because God help us if we don't have fun. Michael and Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is very exciting. Thanks for being a part of my podcast and the launch of this podcast, because you guys are you are the fourth podcast only that I have recorded. And we're going to be releasing this particular one the very first week of launch.
I just want to know who got the first 3 slots in front of Tim and I.
Yeah, right?
That's messed up.
My mom,
that's kind
God,
of
and my wife.
Okay.
good answer. Wait, but that was mom, God, wife? Is that the order?
Yeah.
All right, still good answer.
I'm not saying it was in that order. So why don't we just model a little bit of a check-in? So how's your guys' last couple weeks been?
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. It's been great and very challenging on the can't find enough time to get everything done that I need to get done scale. The one area that's lacking that I don't like I can deal with lacking on my business needs and on my to-do lists when it comes to just the everyday work type stuff. But what I've been feeling the sting is family time, just not getting enough family time. And I knew that this is exactly what was going to happen with the season change and me getting very busy with work. The challenge has been just not feeling very connected to my wife, my children, and what was very cool is my brother showed up with his wife and baby girl yesterday, just kind of on a whim, and we all got to hang out and spend time together. And he and I don't get a lot of that time, so that was pretty special. We actually were up way too late last night talking, and I even nodded out on him a couple times in the middle of the conversation. Really, it's amazing how grateful I am to have the love and mutual respect I have with my brother. He's 9 years younger than me. And what's crazy is we were talking last night about the situations I put him in at the end of my heyday of active addiction. And oh my God, it was quite a moment. There was a couple times I had to just tell him, shut up for a second. I got to collect myself here because I'm freaking out about how selfish and self-absorbed and idiotic I actually was in that situation of putting him in harm's way. And without getting into too many details, but just the part that struck me was realizing that he was the age that my children are when I literally brought him into the belly of the beast, as I like to say. I did not expect that conversation to happen last night. He was amazing. He was really graceful and sweet about the impact of that particular time and how it really set him up to be become kind of who he is today. The juxtaposition between my old life, if you will, and then it was very soon after that I got help and began my recovery. And to blow him up a little bit, he's an Olympic medalist, and he attributes that moment kind of thing, that seeing me at my worst and then seeing me get better at that particular time of his life, to making very concrete decisions about what he was going to do next and how he was going to do things differently. So it was really a fascinating conversation. But it began to hit me that, my kids they're 10 years old, and, I was 11 years old when I started using substances. So I'm really beginning to think about how I want to continue these conversations. We've begun these conversations with our kids about substance use, but how I really want to show up and demonstrate the importance of their sincerity and their honesty. And that's been the challenge of the last few weeks, of not spending enough time. The focus has been too much on me enforcing rules rather than me sitting and having conversations. But I will happily and proudly state that I haven't had any anger outbursts that I've been ashamed of. Felt like I really needed to apologize. I've been able to be direct, firm, and if not, even a little playful. That's kind of what's going on. And then Kim and I, we haven't been getting much time together, and we're both super busy, which I hate that term. I tell my friends who use that term that don't use the term busy, use the word abundant. My life is abundant, but it's not worth it to be so abundant that I don't have the time to spend with my loved ones. So I'm hoping that I can carve out some more, but the reality is what it is, that in order for me to take advantage of the season, to move things forward professionally, this was an agreed situation that we're going to have to juggle this a little bit. So, and missing you guys, haven't really felt connected with you guys for a few weeks. Looking forward to getting back on board. And this right here, this is a great kind of intro to, I guess, us reconnecting. It's nice to know that you guys are as committed as you are to this relationship. And I always appreciate the fact that no matter what, I know you're in my corner. So Dan, thanks again for having us on. And I think I went way over our typical time.
No, that was great. I mean, just for our listeners to understand, like, we are doing the kind of check-ins that we do in a very safe and vulnerable way. And you just modeled it beautifully. Thank you. And you just recently celebrated 25 years in your own recovery journey. And so it's powerful that you're still having these conversations with your family about your use from that long ago, and the healing is still there, but also just how amazing it is that who you've become and where you were 25 years ago is a real testimony. And I'd like our listeners, because this is the first time meeting both of you guys, I'd like our listeners to learn a little bit more about you too. So why don't we, after this check-in and after we've had a chance to talk a little bit more, make sure that we get to hear from both of you about, who you are, so they have some sense of the men that they've just heard so powerfully show up. Michael, you want to go or you want me to go?
I'll go. Yeah. Thanks, Tim, for checking in. I'm glad you went first. It gave me a little perspective. I was it's just in a weird place, man, getting on the phone this afternoon, just some fear, and then taking Caden to something happened with Caden at school. Some kids were making fun of him or whatever, and so we went on a walk, and we had a little dinner, then we went to soccer practice, and when we were coming back, I was like, guys, I got to get on this podcast thing, and Mom's going out, so just please go to, just have a snack, go upstairs, get yourself ready for bed. And it's like, I blame Jill for these things, but because she gets so weird about bedtimes, but she gets angry, and then we start to spiral. So I was in like a shame cycle getting on this, because I'm like supposed to be modeling healthy behavior, and Jill, I'm sitting there going, thanks a lot. I'm supposed to get on this podcast in a few minutes, and you're giving me crap. The kids aren't listening, and I'm like tripping out on everybody and getting weird, feeling sorry for myself. I can't even pray or meditate. I can't get myself centered, and it's just ridiculous. But the whole thing about, you were talking about the anger outbursts, Tim, and the success, and we just came off of vacation. Usually Jill and I get into, especially driving or in transition, like in airports and stuff, we tend to always have like one where we kind of undoes the whole vacation, where we go after each other. And this time we made it through the whole vacation on our best behavior and treating each other well. And Jill said that she witnessed a real difference in me putting my cell phone away for most of the day, and how much I was able to really be available throughout the days, and how much that meant to her and the kids and all. So that was a huge success. And on the way home from the airport last week, there was a guy sitting next to me who couldn't speak English, and Jill's fluent in Spanish, and the conductor was asking for his ticket, and he didn't know what was going on, and Jill came over and interpreted for him, and I found out he was from Cuba and just here for till the 18th, and he was going home to be with his mother, who he found out was sick a month ago. And we got to talking, and he showed me some pictures on his phone that he's a baseball player, and all that came to, I got his number, and I made a couple of phone calls because I know someone that works for the Rockies, and got really, really good tickets, and brought this guy. He met us in front of the statue in front of Coors Stadium on Sunday, and Jill came, and we took him out to lunch, and the kids came, and the guy teared up when he walked into Coors Stadium, and they were playing the Dodgers, and I guess the Dodgers have a player that was his hero from Cuba. And it was just so cool to see the kids, how happy they were to see this man being so excited and tearful and all about being at a professional baseball game. And so they got a little dose of the 12th step and what it's like to be of service. And it was something that Jill and I could do together as a team, because I needed her to do a lot of interpreting for me. So all that said, there's been some beautiful moments, and then there was a half hour ago, and so I'm going through, the last thing I'll say is I'm going through this transition of leaving one job and not having another right now. That I've got these things in the works that I'm looking at potentially opening up my own treatment center, but it's not, nothing's definite. And so I can feel the fear starting to come up, but at the same time, I feel more peace than I've ever felt in a transition of this magnitude, knowing that I have little kids to provide for, and a mortgage, and a wife, and car payments and all. And I just have a sense that I'm going to end up where I'm supposed to, with moments of, what am I doing? I can't believe I'm leaving something without having something set. So there's a lot of emotions flying, but I feel probably a little bit over caffeinated, and we know I probably shouldn't be drinking caffeine at this point in my life. I'm doing it anyway. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Love the caffeine reference.
Why I shouldn't be drinking caffeine.
It's so interesting. One of my mantras for this podcast that I really want to reinforce is that it's not about doing it perfectly, it's about doing it consciously. You two really just reflect that so beautifully, and that you're willing to show up as openly and honestly as you are for this podcast is really powerful. But just reflecting, the power of an examined life as a man. And so then you also, you guys raised the bar as far as what I was going to do as far as my check-in. So now I gotta join you.
Yeah, this was your idea. Remember that.
I didn't think you guys were going to take me serious. Oh my God.
You only have yourself to blame, Daniel.
You guys know that. I toned it down for the podcast.
You forgot to mention the part where you were crying in the corner?
Just saying, I hate myself. Why can't you be more brother?
I'm so stupid. No, but in all seriousness, so yeah, I've missed you guys, and I just so value this time and this opportunity to just get real. And, it's been a similar couple of weeks for me. I've got this big work project that's happening, and there's been a fair amount of stress just around all the details of it and the nuts and bolts. And man, talk about abundance. I could never have written this for myself, but it brings up a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity and then impatience. And I think I mentioned this to you guys, but I can't remember. Like, I'm really, really been committed lately to this new practice that, like, 2 weeks ago or so, where I really want to be more easygoing. And, for our listeners who don't really know me, they may not have any sense of what that means. But, we were coming back from this really cool thing called Cyclavia, where they shut down parts of the road all throughout LA and from Culver City to Venice. And they shut down like several of the main roads so that from downtown Culver City, you can bike all the way to Venice on some of the most, the biggest, most usually busiest streets. So we did that. And then we're coming back and I saw a neighbor, and it's a guy that I play some tennis with and really good guy. I looked at Nancy and I just said, gosh, he's so easygoing. I wish I could be like that. And she just looked at me and she was like, you can. And I'm like, what? No, I can't. I mean, I just like have this idea that it's in my DNA. I'm Irish, I'm this, I'm that. But I've really been working on doing that in everything. Email, phone, my relationship with Nancy, my relationship with Grace, my relationship with work, my relationship for the people who are doing work for me. All of it is like, and it could be little things and it might not be little things, but like just the stuff that you guys were talking about. I'm usually like really stern about bedtime. And the other night, it's been spring break and we were having a lot of fun and we were watching something and it got later and later. And I just was like, you know what? I'm not going to go crazy about forcing, Grace into bed and to ruin this great time with just being strict and stern. And I was laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, look who's still up. And, if that was our day to day, I would probably have some concerns, but just being able to show up more relaxed, like with Nancy around certain things, just letting go, not saying stuff, the pause button. That's that incredible gift of just pausing. Do I need to say this? Is it necessary? Is it important? Is it kind? Those have been really important to me. So I've been more relaxed. I mean, it's been crazy. I've been continuing that practice with Grace where she now expects it. Like if I'm not necessarily raising my voice, but if I'm going to do something somewhat stern or something like that, I get on my knees and it immediately kind of brings me down. And so I'm not going to be super loud or super intense, but it really helps her and helps her feel safer. And so, I've been doing that and with Nancy, just more affection and more closeness. And I had some stuff. I mean, like, the intimacy piece with us is always something that it's always a conversation. And, I always try to be mindful of not taking stuff personally or feeling like if I am feeling rejected, not taking it out on her and figuring out a way to communicate it. And all of that has been part of, what I call easygoing Dan. So that's like my mantra is like, what does easygoing look like? Just tonight, a little thing. I know it's a little thing, but it all adds up. Grace left her dishes for like the 100th time outside and I just picked them up and I took them in. And again, I have something in the back of my head that says, if I do this, if I do this, she's going to become lazy. She's going to become spoiled. She's going to start doing drugs and then she's going to become a prostitute and that's it. We've lost her. And,
keep her off the pole, Dan. You have one job. One job.
One thing at a time. Just realizing that, it doesn't have to be so strict. It doesn't have to be so reactive or fear, and that I can own that. And the same thing with employees. And the big thing that I'm realizing is that it's got to come from a place of vulnerability. Like if I'm not being more honest, then I can come across the wrong way. then I'm going to get stressed and might take my stress out instead of saying like, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm afraid I don't know how to do this, or I'm really afraid of screwing, I've got this one person who's doing some work for me and I haven't had a lot of success with that. And some of it's been my personality. And so I just had to like say at a certain point, I'm afraid I'm going to screw this up. I'm afraid that this is going to go in the same direction. And it doesn't mean the person's going to work for me much longer, and they might, but it's more the fact that I was already getting afraid that it was going down that path. And so I started to act that way. And so I was able to just turn it around with just a little bit of vulnerability. And that's the essence of this podcast really, is how do we demonstrate true vulnerability for men? And quite honestly, that's the real intention behind this particular episode, or this particular part of the podcast that I'm hoping we can do on a regular basis, to just demonstrate a different type of masculinity, and authentic masculinity and vulnerability. So, I know that's part of the solution, and it can still be difficult. But, I also know it has to do with gratitude, and it also has to do with just taking the time to take a deep breath. My first assumption is that you're wrong. It's your fault. So I got to just take a deep breath and step back and like, am I even seeing this clearly? What if I just picked up the phone instead of sending an email or something like that? And so it's the pause button, but it's really coming from this place of, what does it mean to be easygoing, Dan? So it's been a fun challenge. I honestly, out of all these years of trying to live a fairly conscious life, I think I used to revel and even glorify, glamorize the idea of being so intense and so reactive and so Irish, quote unquote. I'm realizing like, I don't know that it's ultimately going to serve me. And like both of you guys, we're all trying to juggle like increasing demands on our time and some of the business stuff and then the family. And I think that's a huge issue for men these days, is how do we balance those in really healthy ways? And my travel is going to be going up significantly over the next year at least. And so I'm really trying to be mindful of like, I don't want them being happy that I'm gone. And when I'm here, I want to be really present. And even if I'm there and I'm being reactive or short or strict or whatever, that's not really being present, but it certainly is not like, oh, hey, great, glad you're home. Anyway, so that's me.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Then maybe we'll just talk a little bit about this structure and why it's been useful for us, maybe some of the core themes that we've seen, and then again, for you guys to have a chance to share about who you are. Well, I'll start since I'm already talking, so I'll give feedback to Tim. So one, so awesome to hear you talk about the anger piece and then that not coming up, because that's huge. I mean, for all of us and for so many men, but, I'm just really glad to hear. And even though I know you've got fear around this new business venture, you're being so thoughtful about how you're doing it and going into it with some awareness, like it's going to change the way you're able to be present with your family, but you're being mindful about it and you're talking about it and you guys are preparing for it. You're not being victims about it or passive about it. And, and I think that will make a huge difference. And, that conversation with your brother and just thinking about your brother and that connection and what that means, and that continue to, the opportunity for you to be alive for one, but then to be present with him and to see the value that has. What a gift for your recovery, but what a gift for your guys' relationship, and to have the kind of relationship that brothers can have or that siblings can have. So great to hear. And you sound like you've got a lot of it in balance and perspective, which really sounds great.
Thanks, Dan. I'll take the perspective. I'll keep working on the slackline skills for the balance.
Yeah, Tim, I didn't realize, I know we had a lot in common, but I didn't realize the whole 25-year mark and all. It's amazing. We seem to be on a very similar journey. I, too, was impacted by, I always wanted a brother growing up. especially an older brother. Because where I grew up in New York, man, there was it's like mob style. You just needed protection. And having an older brother meant certain people wouldn't come after you. Now I have you guys. I have some other soul brothers and all, but it's cool that you can connect with. There's something about family, them knowing you at your core and him seeing that transformation. That's got to be just amazing for him. That's your Olympic medal, that transformation that's happened over 25 years. I think that's all I'll share. I just appreciate you taking the lead and opening this conversation up.
Let me just reiterate that. I mean, just for our listeners, the fact that you started and just came in and were willing to just go whoop right down and layer down in a really authentic way. I mean, you created the space and you set the tone for both of us and all of us. That was awesome.
Thanks, Dan. And going out of our typical format, just real quick, speaking to the listeners, we are this group because of you, Dan. Right? You called us all out, as I like to say, to gather together in this mindful way and to really challenge one another in a loving, supportive way. I had no doubt when you asked us to do this podcast that we would have the opportunity to model exactly what we've been doing. And I think the greatest gift that I've received from this group, from you guys, is I don't really care how sensitive I sound or how personal I sound or how challenged I sound nearly as much as I used to. And to not know how many people will actually listen to this is irrelevant. And if any one person listens to it and feels inspired, jackpot. I had no doubt that we'd all go where we needed to go tonight, and it would be consistent with what we typically do. So again, I wanted to say thanks on both sides of that coin, where, if it wasn't for you, Dan, calling us out originally and then giving us this opportunity to, model for those who are listening, I think we'd all be in very different places.
Thanks, man.
You bet.
All right. So Michael, man, you and I had a chance to talk when you were coming back from vacation, and I was able to just hear it in your voice. One, the excitement about the success of a vacation, and anybody listening knows, who has had to be a part of a core family and a parent in charge of going on a core family vacation, that, it brings up a lot of stuff. And it sounds like it was just such a wonderful experience and a great time, and you all were just really present and even present when you were getting ruffled a little bit. That was so great. That story that you just told about the guy, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. But then, you have those experiences all the time, but then what a gift. You got to bring Jill into that experience, which probably doesn't happen a lot. So she hears of you having all these really powerful experiences, and then you guys have your relationship, and then she's not necessarily always experiencing that. And yet she now got to be a huge part of it. In fact, like a critical part of it. And then it unfolded from, just doing some translation into a freaking experience at the baseball stadium. And this guy, I mean, only you, I swear to God, like every other week, it's like, oh yeah, then I ran into this guy who went to school with my father, and it turns out he's a millionaire, and he's bought a car, and the car drove itself to my house, and my house then all of a sudden started turning into rainbows and unicorns, and my kids all of a sudden were so smart, and I owe it all to just this one rapper I found in the street.
Yeah. That had acid in it.
I mean, it's just so cool. It's so cool because we all have a very strong spiritual part. I mean, there's a real strong spiritual component of this for all of us. But to see how that plays out in your life is very, very cool. And I don't want to make light of it because it's really cool to see how that happened. And what a gift to that man. I mean, I just imagine, like, not knowing the language, not knowing what what's going on here, and probably in this day and age, afraid of how people are going to respond. And here he meets not only these people who are willing to translate, but invite him to dinner, to get him tickets for a game. I mean, it's just What an incredible thing to model for your kids, like you said, that idea of being of service. I'm just so happy for how things are moving, for you and how you're showing up around it all and the humility that you're showing, but particularly for you and Jill, and just that openness is really sweet, man.
Right on. It's so funny because Caden said the same thing. He's like, "Dad, this is like normal for you, but this is really cool. Like this is like." He's such a cute kid.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, Michael, I really loved your share tonight. I'm kind of going to work backwards from the coffee and just relating completely. Bodie was sick today, and how sick is always in question, right? When you have a 10-year-old who is stressed out about his homework. My reaction to it is very direct, right? Do this, do that, do this. And Kim was trying to soften me up a little bit. I was responding to her wanting me to be softer and realizing, wait a minute, you go the wrong way here, kid. So I was able to sit with him this evening and really breathe with him. But it was, the reason I'm mentioning all that is just before the podcast or the call here, he came downstairs for some medicine. And I was just like, dude, just go to bed. And then it clicked. Oh, wait, you took a nap. So never mind. Just go breathe. And go get in your bed and breathe. I always love the way you catch yourself, no matter how great it's going. We all throw the bombs, and so hearing you share about that tonight and how you were frazzled and how you weren't pleased with yourself, but at the same time, it's that ability to be matter of fact and know that there's a sting and know that there's some shame coming up. Mm-hmm. But feeling confident and comfortable enough to just say it, and just know that saying it alone is going to help you be that much more aware. And, obviously, like we all know we can do better, right? And that's another thing I always appreciate when I, say something to my son or my wife or my daughter and act in a way that I know it's not okay. And you guys tell me, you remind me it's not okay. I'm not judging you. I love you. I love that you are aware, and just remember the next time. Mm-hmm. I have no doubt that Caden knows that you're in his corner no matter what. Mm-hmm. I want to also echo what Dan said about that whole situation, and the piece. I grabbed the exact same piece of it. Like, yeah, that's you. You're going to do something extraordinary for somebody else, not because it's extraordinary to you, but because it's the right thing, and you have the opportunity to do it. That in and of itself is just like, that's who you are, and that's awesome. But the fact that you were able to include Jill in it and really have that experience together, and for that dynamic to happen, and hearing that story from that perspective was just, I was giggling the whole time, muted luckily. But I was really just, kind of visualizing the whole story. So I love that that's who you are. You have that spontaneity in you and that huge heart. The last thing I just want to speak to is the leap. Knowing that leap that you've taken professionally, and you've been really calm, the conversations we've been having, and you've been really centered in absolute. I don't believe it for a second that it's covering anything. I think it's truly authentic, peaceful purpose going on here. I just want to continue to encourage you to be that authentic self and play with it, because as you guys know, my last few months of maybe taking it a little too far of being my authentic, playful self. I just keep digging it. It just keeps getting better. And it's funny, I was talking to a very dear friend who's known me a very long time, and he's going through major life upheaval. And I said to him, I said, dude, who are we kidding? We both have the same end game here, which is, to live in a van down by the river. So as long as we can get honest about that, whatever success we have on our way down to the river, it's going to be a hoot, So let's not take this too seriously. So I just want to reflect that back at you, because I know you have a very similar vision of yourself, and I have no doubt that the success is due in a sense. So I love you, man, and thanks again for that story. It was really amazing.
Thanks, Tim. Brother Dan, you ready for some feedback?
Bring it.
Yeah, I thought your story was great about the, getting on your knees with her. I think you can't go wrong with getting on your knees when you're talking to Grace. That's an act of surrender in a way, and just saying, I want to be a safe person always. I like that. I like that visual. I also think that there's something like I do, I'm totally with Nancy on the, you can be easygoing, Dan, and at the same time, I was thinking that you are a cool guy and a pretty beautiful creation by God for who you are right now, and that I support you either way, the easygoing and the intense. And I know where you were getting at. That's just sort of self-acceptance and breaking down the story, whatever story you've told yourself about who you are. And so I like the fact that you're challenging that story and opening yourself up to possibilities that go, far beyond. I have heard, that in sobriety, it's like for every year, I don't know if you told me this or not, every year you get like a half second of pause. And, I can relate to that, man. Every time I don't pause, I get a big shame hit and think, when am I going to learn to breathe and to center myself before I press send or before I open my mouth. So I'm more interested, sort of Mother Teresa style, in celebrating the smaller victories like what you're talking about than the super big stuff. It's those moments, like you said, that build on each other and then become the norm. You're pretty good about celebrating yourself and those victories along the way. There is a little, Irish Catholic in me where I'm like not ready to like celebrate myself in any way. But I think you're a good model of someone that's willing to claim victory, and say, hey, if we're going to look at the bad, we should look at the good too. And so that's cool. That's my feedback.
Thanks, man. That's nice. That's nice to hear too. I don't know how well I let it in, but I am pretty good at bringing it up. And, that's certainly a start of just trying to acknowledge the progress as well. So I appreciate that.
I don't know where this image came from, but when you started talking about, the laid back Dan, my immediate image was a cat with its claws dug in your back. From the standpoint of when you're intense, that's like the vibe. Like you are, you're standing up straight and your chest is out and you are, you're like, there's this fire in your eyes and not, non-threatening in any way, just this really intensity, this incredible intensity. And I don't know why, but it made me think maybe he's just got a cat hanging on his back sometimes. And I think back to the first time we met at that conference and watching you present and me literally having the audible yes, after you stating a couple of things where you were getting intense. I love that you're connecting to this easygoing Dan, because I feel like that's actually a big part of what you're doing right now on a much bigger scale. And I don't know if you're catching what I'm saying here. Like I think that you're what you're getting involved in, what you're building, what you're expanding your life and your service to is like really showing the world this layer of you that you have maybe not known. Well, I think you've definitely known, but you've just finally given yourself permission to become and to manifest and to nurture. And, we talked about you playing music recently and, playing live. And so like that playful part of you, that easygoing, I love that you're challenging yourself to believe it. So just go for it, model it, wear it. Because I have no doubt that you will wear it well. And maybe it's just the LA thing. You're just laid back because you're in California now. I also want to mention the piece about, kneeling, the pause of a mentor who's got 37 years in sobriety. He's been on some of the most amazing spiritual journeys and retreats and that sort of thing. sitting with teachers. He says that the most challenging direction he's ever read out of all sacred texts is out of the Big Book, and it's the word pause when agitated. It's the line, pause when agitated.
Wow.
Or doubtful.
Yeah.
Pause when agitated or doubtful.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest actual skill. So I love that you bring it up, because I can't even count how many times I use that in my work, and I've had 2 weeks of a lot of intentional pausing, and it's just so effective. And that deep breath, hearing you speak so specifically about it and how you are conscious of it, how you're working on the softer side. And I don't even like saying side, it's just this, you're allowing your softness to emerge. It's not a side of you, it is who you are. I love that it's all translating. Yeah. Love you, and thanks again for calling us out.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thank you. Thanks for that acknowledgement. That's really cool. And I see that. I feel that. And what's interesting is I was thinking about it. I was like, if anybody read any of my books, I think, that's who I'm trying to be now more in my day to day. 'Cause I think the way I show up in my books is kind of like that. And because it's really safe, when you're writing a book, to show up however you want versus putting that out and being that out in the world. So who knows where this will all lead. The other thought I had, and then we can close out on this, but the thought I had as I'm thinking of other men and women listening to our podcast, just like listening in, and for some it might be a voyeuristic sort of aspect, and for others it might just feel like they're coming and joining a meeting or a circle or something. But at the end of the day, the only thing that we're doing is being honest with ourselves and each other. We're not doing anything radical, quite honestly. It's just that we're not allowing the man rules, as relates to this podcast, allowing the man rules to determine or define how we communicate about our lives and our relationships. And instead, we tell the truth, irrespective of how the man rules may or may not judge that. So that really occurred to me as we were talking, as I was thinking, and it's so powerful and yet so simple.
And that's the efficacy, right? That's why it works. It's that, because it's truly that simple.
All right. Before we head out, Tim and Michael, just do me a favor and just introduce yourselves a little bit to our listeners, because we are going to do this on a regular basis. They are going to get to know you just as if you're a guide on a journey. Just say a little bit about who you are.
No, you get to lead this one.
After you. Indubitably.
I'll give the 1 minute. So yeah, born a crazy, dyslexic, red hair, freckle face, a little bit of an anger issue, New York Catholic dude who found alcohol. I found alcohol at 13 and went through a private high school and then Boston College, and sobered up a year out of college, had a spiritual experience, and created a lot of wreckage in the decade that I was out there. And so God's got me on a 25-year journey of learning how to connect and love and give back and be in partnership. So I've been married 15 years. Not proud of it, but just by the grace of God, I've been faithful and doing our best to be good parents to two beautiful kids, Caden, who is turning 12 in May, and Samantha, who just turned 10 the day after I turned 49 when we were down in Naples, Florida last week. We live in Denver, and I've been in the treatment industry or the helping profession for 22 years, and I've done all sorts of stuff. Got a certificate in spiritual direction and specialized after my master's degree in intimacy disorders, and got trained by Patrick Carnes, so I'm a CSAT. Just have really appreciate the journey I've been on out here living in Colorado and meeting guys like you and being on this journey of recovery and spiritual development. I did that all in less than 2 minutes. Wow. It's amazing for a guy with monotonous rambling being one of my defects of character.
That was miraculous. See, the impact of this podcast is already being felt.
Oh, way to set the bar, brother. Oh, man. So, Tim Walsh, professional adolescent. What that means to me is I get paid to play. Pretty damn good at it. I'm an outdoor educator by trade and by training and by experience. And I've been working in this field, addictions and mental health field, actually, since I got sober. My first job was working in the kitchen of the rehab I went to on my third week, which is another mind-blowing story. I got to actually celebrate my 25th anniversary there. On the day I arrived at the place, I spoke 25 years later on the day, which was just blew my mind.
That's awesome.
The whole recovery, living this thing. I'm a father of twins, Bodie and Sloan, my son and my daughter. My wife and I say we've successfully duplicated our carbon footprint. My wife, Kim, my partner, my best friend, my accountability buddy. I always joke and say I married Kim because at the time I was on expeditions on the average of 180 days a year. And I'd come back after anywhere from 10 to 14 days. And after a couple of days of being together, she'd look at her watch, look at the calendar and say, "Hey, when are you going back to the field?" The adjustment of being back in the field, not on expeditions, but on a daily basis. And showing up as a dad is my greatest challenge right now. I'm most proud of the most recent steps of relaunching a brand that's been 25 years in the making called Adventure Recovery. And my goal of this organization is to introduce as many people as possible to the wonder of what adventure and living a life in the outdoors truly can provide for anybody at any time, but especially for people in early recovery. So I'm really excited about it, and I owe a lot of gratitude to you guys for holding space for me over the last few months of sorting out how and when and if I was going to even attempt this. So that's who I am and what I'm doing, and looking forward to the success of this podcast, Dan.
Thank you both. And it's just so cool. I mean, this is surreal for me, and I'm just so excited to see where this all goes. I'm really committed to letting go of thinking that this needs to be anything other than me having an opportunity to share a powerful message with others and to hear their messages and have a conversation. This particular podcast, what I'd like, call the Man Rules Deep Dive, is such a wonderful, powerful living example of the work that we're all trying to do. But it so reflects what my ultimate goal is with this podcast. So I just really, really want to thank you both for being a part of it, for taking the risk, putting yourselves out there and being willing to do this. So I want to thank Michael, Dinneen, I want to thank Tim Walsh, and I want to thank our listeners for being a part of this. I will make sure that Michael and Tim's contact information is available on the website, manrules.com. And, if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to contact me, Dan, at themanrules.com. We encourage you to find a place and people in your life where you can create these same conversations. Because again, it's just about being honest about what's happening in our lives. And thinking that we can't be honest is what destroys so many men, so many very, very good men. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Man Rules Podcast, where we don't let the rules rule us. If you have ideas for guests, topics, or even want to be a guest, send us an email at ideas@themanrules.com and check out our website and everything we're up to at themanrules.com. The only question we have to ask is what kind of man you want to be and what's keeping you from being that man.